The clock on the wall of the holding cell didn't tick. It hummed, a low-frequency vibration that seemed to rattle Arthur Vance's very teeth. It was 11:00 p.m. on December 31st. Outside the frosted high-security windows of the precinct, the city of Oakhaven was preparing for its bicentennial New Year's Eve celebration. But inside, the air tasted of stale coffee and impending ruin. Arthur was not a man who believed in ruin. He was a man who believed in paper. He believed in the power of a misplaced comma, a late filing, and the beautiful, cold logic of a procedural error. His lawyer, a man named Sterling who looked like a predatory bird in a bespoke suit, leaned against the iron bars. He wasn't behind them. He was waiting for the guard to turn the key. "It's done," Sterling whispered, his voice smooth as oil. "The judge signed the order 10 minutes ago. We argued that your detention was not only based on illegally obtained evidence but was a direct violation of the standing statutes. In this specific jurisdiction, given the nature of the delay in your arraignment, bail isn't just a discretion the judge can weigh. It is mandatory." Arthur let out a breath he felt he'd been holding for months. And the complainants, the families from the North Side Project. Sterling waved a manicured hand dismissively. "They're screaming about contemptuous activities and moral illegality. They've even filed some bizarre civil motion claiming you violated communal rights. It's nonsense. They're trying to use ancient local charters to keep you locked up. But the law of the state is clear. You walk at midnight." Arthur smiled. It was a sharp, thin thing. He had authorized the use of substandard materials in the North Side housing units, a move that had saved him millions and subsequently led to a structural collapse during a winter storm. People had died. Families had been broken. But Arthur had the best paper in the world. The Midnight Walk. At 11:45 p.m., the heavy steel doors groaned open. Arthur was handed his personal effects, a gold watch, a silk tie, and his smartphone. He dressed with meticulous care. He wanted to look like a victor when he stepped out into the new year. The precinct was strangely empty. The usual chaos of a New Year's Eve shift, the drunks, the brawlers, the frantic paperwork, was absent. The hallways felt elongated, the fluorescent lights flickering in a rhythmic pulse that matched the humming clock. "Where is everyone?" Arthur asked, his footsteps echoing too loudly on the linoleum. "Front-line duty," the desk sergeant said without looking up. The sergeant's skin looked gray, almost like wet ash. "Big crowd in the square. Everyone wants to see the year turn." Arthur stepped through the final set of double doors and out into the night. Sterling was supposed to be waiting with the car, but the curb was empty. The street was silent. A thick, unnatural fog had rolled in from the river, swallowing the base of the skyscrapers and muffling the distant sound of party horns. He checked his watch, 11:55 p.m. He began to walk toward the square, thinking Sterling might have been forced to park a few blocks away. As he turned the corner onto Blackwood Avenue, he noticed something strange. The storefronts were decorated for the holiday, but the mannequins in the windows weren't wearing clothes. They were wrapped in heavy, rusted chains. "Sterling," he called out. His voice felt flat, as if the fog were absorbing the sound. From the shadows of an alleyway, a figure emerged. It wasn't Sterling. It was an old woman, wrapped in a shawl made of what looked like tattered legal briefs and eviction notices. She held a lantern that burned with a cold, blue flame. "The man of the hour," she croaked. "The man who found the loophole." "Get away from me," Arthur said, reaching for his phone to call a ride. "No signal. I'm a free man. A judge ordered my release. It's mandatory." "Oh, we know," the woman said, her eyes reflecting the blue flame. "We counted on it. The law of the land says you cannot be held in a cage of iron and stone tonight. It says you must be out in the world, among the people you served." Arthur stepped back, his heart hammering. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The complainants," she whispered. "You ignored their pleas, so they looked to older laws. You see, Mr. Vance, while the state has its statutes, this land has its covenants. You committed an illegality against the soil and the blood, and the penalty for contempt of the living is a debt that must be collected in person. The clock in the distant town square began to chime. 1. The fog around Arthur began to solidify. It wasn't mist anymore, it was faces. Hundreds of them. He recognized them from the files, the people from the north side. They weren't screaming, they were just watching. 2. Arthur turned to run back to the precinct, but the building was gone. In its place was a towering wall of ice and debris, resembling the collapsed ruins of the apartment complex he had built. 3. I followed the law, Arthur screamed at the approaching shadows. I have the papers, I was granted bail. 4. The old woman stepped closer. Bail is just a temporary stay, Arthur. It means you are released into the custody of a guarantor. Did you never ask who signed for you? 5. Arthur looked down at his gold watch. The glass was cracking. The hands were spinning backward. The ground beneath his feet began to soften, turning from asphalt into cold, black mud. He felt hands, dozens of them, reaching up from the earth, grasping at his ankles. They weren't ghost hands. They were heavy, solid, and smelled of wet concrete and winter earth. "Sterling," he shrieked. A car pulled up out of the fog. It was his town car. The door swung open. He lunged for it, desperate for the sanctuary of the leather interior. But as he scrambled inside, he realized the seats weren't leather. They were made of the same gray, crumbling drywall that had buried the families in the north side. 8. The driver turned around. It was Sterling, but his mouth was sewn shut with the same golden wire Arthur used for his high-end stationery. The lawyer held up a final document. It wasn't a release order. It was a deed. 9. The technicality worked, Arthur. The woman's voice echoed inside the car, though she stood outside. The law said you couldn't be in jail, but it never said you had to stay in this year. The square erupted. Far away, thousands of people cheered Happy New Year. Fireworks burst in the sky, brilliant reds and greens reflecting off the fog. But for Arthur, the lights were turning a sickly, permanent blue. The interior of the car was filling with freezing water and falling brick. He tried to scream, but his lungs filled with the dust of his own cheap construction. The year turned. In Oakhaven, the celebration was legendary. The news reported that Arthur Vance had vanished moments after his controversial mandatory release, a suspected flight from justice that left the authorities embarrassed. But in the silence of the north side ruins, if you stand very still at midnight, you can hear the sound of a gold watch ticking beneath the earth. It ticks once for every second of life Arthur Vance stole, and the count is nowhere near finished. The loophole had worked perfectly. He was out of jail, but he was exactly where the complainants wanted him, in a place where the law of man ends and the mandatory sentence begins.